Good evening, everybody. It is November 21st, 2023. I'll start by reading our vision statement. The Ashland Public Schools is a forward-thinking district that cultivates the academic and social-emotional growth of each student through a supportive, collaborative, innovative, and challenging environment. Students will develop into self-motivated, resilient, lifelong learners who embrace their role as responsible contributors to a global community. This meeting is being recorded by WACA-Cable TV, and our order of business this evening includes our opening procedure, agenda review and adoption, public comment, items of interest to the public, and our administrative items this evening include request to establish a new student organization and stipend at Mindess, the Rainbow Club, request to establish a new student organization and stipend at AYBS, the Culinary Club, Sean Weglage, Ashland Youth Baseball, Softball, AYBS, Softball Field, Lighting Installation Proposal for the Warren School, School Physician Role, Dr. Chartor's retirement, recommended replacement, Dr. Michele Duke, School Choice Funding Allocation FY 2024, High School Improvement Plan, NESDEC enrollment projections, Superintendent's update, Warrant approvals. The consent actions include minutes from October 25th, 2023, gifts and donations, committee reports of activities, member updates, action items, and then we will adjourn. So I will ask for your attendance and to see if you are okay with the order of business this evening. Paul Kendall?
I am.
Aaron Williams?
Here and yes.
Tina Vitanides?
Yes.
Here and yes.
Mark?
And here, right?
And I'm here, and I'm here too. Yeah, I am here.
We were here to say it.
I think we're all here. I'm pretty
All
sure I
right.
can get rid of the virtual COVID here and yes thing.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna see if I know there are a few people on line there. And if there are any people that want to speak publicly, now's the time to do that. So you could raise your hand or turn off. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So seeing none here or there, we'll move on to the next item, which is the request to establish a new student organization and stipend at Mindess, the Rainbow Club.
So I don't know, Meg, Jen, or Jenna, who's going to take the lead on that, but one of you three most capable women, go ahead.
Meg, do you want to take the lead?
Sure, I'm happy to. So the Rainbow Club is like a club that's the equivalent of the Gay Straight Alliance at the elementary level. A lot of the elementary schools in the area have one, but it's basically a safe place for students to meet and talk about different kinds of families, different kinds of people, and it's an accepting way of creating an anti-bullying environment for the students.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions about it?
You have any sense of how many students are interested?
So we haven't solicited any students. We haven't advertised in any way, shape, or form because we wanted to get approval first.
So Megan, on something like this at the elementary school, certainly at the high school level, it's you engage the students directly. At the elementary level, is this like a family engagement kind of thing? How does that work at the elementary level?
Great question. I should have said that. It would be an after-school club for an hour, and would need parent permission, as we do with any club. For an hour after school once a month. So parents would need to sign off on them coming. It would obviously not be mandatory in any way, shape, or form, but any students who were interested. We would not include siblings or families. It's something that has been discussed among other clubs, but I think for Mindess, just starting with Mindess age students who want to stay after school for an hour, and we'll do games, activities, books, crafts, just more promoting a unity experience for them.
And Megan, would this be something that is just open to all students the same way any club would be, that you would just kind of advertise it maybe in, the weekly newsletters, and then any students who are interested would then reach out to you or whoever if they wanted to join?
Yes, it would be exactly like that. And if kids hear about it later, they could always join later. It wouldn't need to be like you sign up for the entire session, or if kids want to try it and it's not for them and they don't want to continue, that would be fine as well.
Excellent. Anybody else? Who's got a motion?
Motion to approve the establishment of a new student organization and stipend at Mindess for the Rainbow Club.
Second?
All in favor? Paul?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Got a new
Thanks,
club,
guys.
the Rainbow Club.
Thank you, ladies.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Next
Have a
up,
good night.
we have a request to establish a new student organization and stipend at AHS called the Culinary Club.
And I actually think that it's just supposed to be the student account. The club is already established and receives a stipend.
Okay.
They've been operating for the last year and a half or so, but have just started this year wanting to do some fundraising, and I think have asked to do a bake sale recently, and just because they've been using their own money to purchase some of the things they're doing for the club, so they just wanted to kind of have a way to raise funds for the group. So they're looking to open a bank account, or
Excellent.
student activities account.
Yeah, the paperwork's correct in the packet, but it was
Yeah.
labeled incorrectly on the agenda.
Okay, so are we comfortable?
Yeah, I was gonna say
acting
that
on
we-
this such, because,
I mean, the club already exists.
right, but what we're doing is not listed.
It's not on the agenda
on
properly.
agenda, the creation of the,
But I think in terms of our obligations to give 48 hours notice to the public of what we reasonably anticipate, and given that we've got on the agenda something related to the Culinary Club and the student organization, I don't think it's inappropriate to anticipate that one of the things that might relate to that is establishment of an account. So I think on something like this, I'm comfortable moving forward, even though the agenda's not quite right.
okay.
I agree.
I will just remind that we create the account and also authorize the principal to make the deposits and withdrawals or act on the account or whatever verbiage we typically do at the
Yeah.
beginning of each
Yep.
year for that.
You
Who's
wanna
got
make
the motion?
No. I was hoping somebody
You
else.
had all the language, Paul.
I didn't, I was hoping somebody else would have the language.
I'll give it a shot. I move to authorize the creation of an account for the Culinary Club, and as well as the authorizing the principal to manage the account consistent with our practices regarding clubs.
Second.
That was a lot better than I was.
All in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Thanks. Next up, the Ashland Youth Baseball, Softball, AYBS Softball Field Lighting Installation Proposal. Good evening,
Hello.
Sean.
So I'm Sean Weglage, for those of you that don't know me. I've been the vice president of softball now for 1 full year, and a lot of the things I've been doing has been organizing field enhancements for the program to not only help the kids want to come and play, but also with the amount of fields we have within Ashland, trying to get everybody to be able to play between baseball and softball has been a challenge, kind of field space. So this year, you guys really helped us with a home run fence at the Warren School, which we had our first home run derby. Just so you know, we had 5 towns and 25 contestants. And
How
we
many home
had
runs?
a trophy, a raffle, prize. We raised $300 for AYBS as a fundraiser. So we're actually utilizing that as well, not just as a pretty fence to have there, but also to get the older kids, that's 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, that can really put it out there, which also saves us from having to pay money to go to the high school and then use theirs fields or middle school or Stone Park. So, so I'm here again to represent the softball side of the house to help us, because specifically this fall, there was a lot of rainouts. So you have a 6-week season, and we had no place to play because if they rained out on a Sunday or a Saturday, which were our games, 4 o'clock, gets dark at 5:30, 5:45. You couldn't move the game to 6 o'clock when the weather might be better. And then even practice times, as it kind of slid, we had some of the kids practicing for 15 minutes because they still wanted to come out and play, and they played in the dark as best they could with coaches with their phones. But it limited us to be able to have a full season for what the families are paying for. And then again, from a season standpoint, even getting a 4 o'clock game in was a challenge because it started to get dark at 5:30, 5:45 as we played. So it kind of transfers into spring and summer as well, because It limits us to, if we have more than 3 teams in a division, you're kind of looking for other towns to pick up where we can't have as many home games at a field. And Warren is the field that we don't have to pay for, so it's also trying to draw more people there versus trying to work with the town to figure out Stone Park, which doesn't have lights, so then it's like, okay, again, rush to do that, and then again, the high school and softball. So the proposal was to just ask the town, the school committee, the board, if there would be an opportunity for us to look at what it's going to cost, because again, we haven't done that because I wanted to wait to see if it's an opportunity. But we have the big field, which is where most of the people play, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th each season. So the lights kind of face towards, if anyone's ever been there, the snack shack. So it's away from the houses that are behind it. And then the small field, which has the annex, so the Warren School kind of annex. So our thought there was like, could you put a couple floodlights there, you know, to help the younger kids that are playing, which is pre-KK and first grade, to be able to keep playing at that point. Instead of putting giant things that are up around the school, kind of try to make it easier. And then I'm assuming it would have to be light poles that would come, you know, looking at Grinsell and looking at the middle school, I kind of figured out where those might have to go. But we haven't done any scoping or pricing or promises. It was just enough coaches wrote in, enough parents wrote in that said it would be great to not have a 5-minute, you know, again, like we got there at 5, we were done at 5:15, or the games getting super dark, or again, we had some teams that couldn't even have a full season because we would call Holliston or Southborough or Medway, which had lights, and we could only use them so many times, you know, again, if it wasn't their town that we were playing in. So it kind of took away from also fundraising from the snack shack for us or stuff that were coming down. So I'll pause there.
Okay, so you want to make sure it's not an absolute no before you go and you do the research
Yeah.
and get more information for us. And Jim, are you aware of any obstacles that would make that?
Not necessarily obstacles. I think it's appropriate to get all of the information to be brought back to the board. Certainly, it is in a residential area, and we want to make sure that we're thoughtful there of the families. But anything we can do to, you know, get our student athletes out there a little bit more, I'm in favor of. It's just the cost, obviously, who it's borne by, and things of that nature need to be done. So.
Anybody else have questions or concerns about it before, you know, it looks like it's very initial phase for you to just go
Yeah, it
and
was
see
just,
what the interest is.
it kind of came up.
Whether there's fundraising opportunities.
Yeah, so our fundraising this year, we've already put our kind of budget in for other enhancements that we're trying to do. So this would be a kind of second year out for our budget.
A little bit down the road.
But it helps us be able to figure out what the pricing would be. Like even the home run fence was a year out, and then it got us enough ability to be able to fundraise, to be able to pay for that fence. And then, so the thought is, it's a costly item, and then the board has someone who's a construction that did all the Grinsell stuff, so we have people that are, you know, smarter than me that can come up and be like, hey, this is what we'd have to run
Right.
conduit up, or again.
Right, where it would have to go.
Yeah,
and-
so we'd have to show you guys, hey, this is what it would look like, and level
Yeah.
that, but it was more just initial, like, is there an opportunity to put lights there to help eventually? I'm in my daughter's 3rd grade, so I'm in it for a while, so.
Yeah.
So it's, again, exciting for me. My older daughter's 16, I coached her way back then, so I'm now back in it.
Yeah.
And then just, again, exciting to watch the kids come and want to be there. Like I said,
Sure.
just having them in the dark, not safe. And then
Right.
also it just limits there. So mostly it's the fall, so again, if people had questions about timing, game, you know, practice was at 5:30, and so you could imagine trying to have a 5:30 in the middle of October when you couldn't even see. So it was like, hey, get here at 5:15 as fast as you can, and then we'll go. And then the older kids, same thing. So it wouldn't push us to like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. It would just give us the ability to play at a regular hour.
Right.
And then the summer games, again, it starts to get dark towards August if you're playing. Usually there's 6 o'clock games end at 7:45. So the goal is to give them opportunity that if we had to have a 7 o'clock, if the weather's changed, so it gives us some more flexibility that there could be
Sure.
lights there.
We did already get one letter from a neighbor who must have seen that this was on the agenda, you know, with some concern. So down the road, obviously, there would have to be, and to see if there are other concerns.
Yep.
And probably that have questions answered about like, will they be on every day? Will they be shining into anyone's home? You know, the typical kinds of things. You know, one of the questions too were, why do kids need to be out that late? But, I mean, we all know living here in New England that it's dark at 4:30 this time of year. So it's not necessarily that we're keeping anybody out any later than they otherwise would be. It's an opportunity to just let them finish their practice or finish their game.
Yeah, like I said, mainly it's for fall, so if it's September through end of October.
Yeah.
Is when, or, you know, before Halloween is usually when we end, but
Yeah.
halfway through our season, that's when it starts to get super dark. So you have 3 weeks, and then the weekends weren't our friends this year because of all the weather, so we had no place to get a game like later, or even, hey, let's play during the week. You couldn't, because you couldn't start a 6 o'clock game during, you know, if you had lights, you could, but we didn't have opportunity, so we lost some playing time.
Yeah.
And then again, most of it's for the kids. Like, hey, we want them out there having fun for what they're paying for and doing that stuff. So yeah, so I guess it'll be helpful for me to know once I get some other things, like what else do you guys need or the town needs to just
Yeah,
know
if
about it.
I can, John, the couple of things that I'd be thinking about, you know, if we got further along with this. So certainly in line with what Jim and Lori have said about, you know, the impact on the houses nearby and the residents nearby, things like that. I think sort of whether or not there would be an agreed upon end time. Because like Grinsell during the summer, there can be stuff going on down there till 10 o'clock at night. I could see that being more of a concern to the neighbors than if there was like a 8 o'clock end time.
Yep.
You know, or something like that. And I'm not trying to legislate that now, I just think it's
Yeah,
a
it's irrelevant.
thing to think about. Who bears the cost of the electricity when they run, right? If it's on our property, I don't know how the electricity is connected over there, but if it's gonna have an ongoing cost to the school district, that's something I think we would have to look at and say, well, now you're using the fields, it's for your purpose, and, you know, we'd have to look at.
Yeah, and I
you
can check, because I
absorbing
know we
cost.
pay for electricity through the snack shack and the water, so we do all that on
Okay.
our own, so I can find out how they would do that.
Yeah, and then the other thing I'm just thinking about is, you know, I don't have a sense of which sort of field is better, whether the Stone Park field or the field at the Warren is better, but I'd be interested just understanding whether the lights would be more useful at one or the other, because obviously one of them is in our purview, one is not. Stone Park is town property, but if
Yes, so Stone Park doesn't get, we've met with Doug and
Yeah.
Roy and Patty, and they're awesome. They just don't have time to keep up. Like, our shack is completely falling apart, and so we're actually meeting with them to see if we can do a quid pro quo, like, hey, don't charge us to use the field if we build you a new shed that's there. But the maintenance on the field, they just don't have the ability. Like, this year, we rented in the summer the high school field, and we didn't get any maintenance. So we would show up there, and sometimes other towns were renting it, and it would take us an hour. We had to cancel a couple games, and we had paid for it because we only had 2 coaches that were setting up the field.
Yeah.
So we're learning things together. Warren is what we're trying to, like the home run fence there, you know, enhancements to the field. Like, we did a Ferraro Landscaping, we paid for them this year to redo all the fields. So if you go down there, you'll see gravel now in front of the dugouts where there used to be mud pits. So we're going to have new batted cages installed, some of the things that we're trying to do. So we're trying to bring.
You're investing in that
We're trying to do is,
property
yeah,
and-
just
and
because
make
we
that
feel
the
like
home.
it's still the
Yeah.
home of softball.
Right.
For what we have. And Stone Park's field has kind of left
Yeah,
behind.
it's not worked that way. Yeah.
So that's what, if that helps answer
Yeah,
that
I
question.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
And to add on, I kind of had the same thoughts that have already been expressed. But the other thing that comes to mind is with lights on that field, is it now going to become something that other towns or groups seek out to use in different ways? And what would that look like? Are there going to be, I mean, I would assume since it's on school property, it would be something we would have to decide how they use, if it can be rented, what that looks like. But people are always looking for field space, right?
And-
Particularly.
And Jim, maybe you can, we have a contract with our youth organization, so we don't have contracts with the other towns, and so that would be a totally different,
Right, but would they be asking to use it? What would the rules around that be? Would I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm not sure how fields are
Right,
used.
does this
or
open
what
us up
other
to-
organizations
Yeah,
would
so
want
I-
to use it.
I
But
had
obviously,
asked,
those fields that are lighted are, they're in demand. And
Yeah, so like
would
the middle
there-
school and the high school rent out to other towns.
Right.
we would not be thinking that way. One is because you control, and we don't have, the town doesn't, they mow the lawn up to the annex and then it stops. So our goal is we pay landscaping to make sure, like, we want to make sure that's that. And then I had asked Holliston, Medway, and Southborough, because again, 2 are on school properties and 1 is near a school property but a little further out. And they only allow you to play if you're with that team,
Right.
unless, like, Southborough rents it out to their men's softball. So if you're in the youth, or the men's softball league of Southborough, you can use that field because it's part of the town. And then it's just their town thing. So it wouldn't be an outside thing that we'd want to do. It's more just trying to help our program continue.
Sure, no, understand. I just think it should be part of the conversation that if it is
Right.
something
Yeah.
that goes forward, that there are rules around the use.
Absolutely.
Anybody else with questions?
More a comment as the vetting of this goes through is that, there, some place like Sunrise Rental or Sunbelt Rentals has the light towers. And I don't know if they're diesel generated or if they're plug and play, but the ability to kind of do a trial with some heavy duty lighting before installing something permanent and being able to talk to the neighbors and see what the impact is. It looks like we wouldn't be looking at something like this for next fall installation, but maybe a trial when you're talking about the sun going down, in October, and working with the board for approval to bring on site equipment.
Yeah,
That's a great idea.
And
Good
it's sort of
idea.
what- That's sort of
Yeah.
why I was thinking
And
about the time limit, like, to me, I'm a little less concerned about impact on the neighbors if lights are going off at 8 o'clock or 8:15 than if we're allowing people to use till 10. I think there's a big difference in terms of the impact on quality of life to people.
And then it's not every night for several months in a row.
Yeah.
right. But if there's an opportunity for rental in the meantime and it's within your budget, then you can get a feel for how it's going to work.
Yep.
Yeah.
The placement, complaints,
Yeah.
whether people are going to start taking an interest in the property that they didn't have before, that sort of thing. So
Yep.
maybe there's an
A
opportunity.
little invitation, come on down and
Right,
have a snack at the snack shack.
Yeah,
Check out
exactly.
our test game,
yeah.
Okay.
And then my other comment was a question to Paul is what are we gaining back for field space at Warren that can help
You
softball?
mean Mindess?
Sorry, yep.
Yeah, so those will be available till 2025, because they're going to be planted in the spring of 2024, so.
And they're going to be
they
allowed
need
to grow
two
for a year.
growing seasons.
Okay.
So if they were planted this fall, then they would be available next fall, but, so we have a baseball and a softball field there, and then in the middle, you can play soccer as well, not at the same time, obviously, but,
And
so-
not lighted.
No, that's not lighted. There's been a question about that brought up, but we're not going to commingle that with our current permitting and things like that. That muddies the water from funding perspective.
Yep.
It's very complicated to introduce that as part of the project, but it has been discussed. So my thoughts are similar to, think about your timing, and not just, I wouldn't be reactive to saying, okay, it's gotta be 8 o'clock, but what do you want, right? And then be prepared for, if 9 o'clock is the right time, that would make sense. I know a lot of the guys that do the things with the program and have the skills and help at Grinzel do these things. I think in a case like this, I think it'll have to be externally designed and professionally designed. In that case, I don't know that temporary lights are helpful because it's a totally different experience, right? So what we did at Mindess is part of what the professionals do with all of our site lighting there was they can have photometric diagrams that actually account for the light spillage of the design and where it's supposed to go, so that we could show, it was part of the permitting process, and I can show you those from the permits, that when it's designed, just like our site lighting at Mindess, it can show that there's no light spillage, right? And that, whereas with temporary light, just because that works or doesn't work, it might actually backfire, because here's these loud lights that are intentionally broad, which might offend somebody, or so. I would say it should be professionally designed and installed, and not not just by the dads that like to help and have the skill set to do it. And with that, you get this level of design that you can, and then they can also be held to that. So somebody can come in and say, hey, these need to be adjusted because they're not to specification, because you'll have a contractor that's, hey, this is what's been specified. So think of the timing. I would definitely recommend that's the route to go is professionally designed, because you'll get that. And when you do it that way, it's gonna be a heck of a lot easier conversation with the neighbors, because you're gonna say, this company designs these things.
Yep.
This is, and they may even be able to say, hey, go to this place, or go to this place, and you'll be able to see the lighting and how they can control that light, just the same way as we do at Mindess for site lighting. It's different. It's not as bright, obviously, as field lighting. But
And would you have recommendations of those types of professionals? Would that be my homework to try to find?
I can ask what they use, but it might be a totally different firm and quite frankly on a different scale. I mean, I don't know how, but I can certainly ask the design team. They were just part of the design team, so through our architect. So.
Jim, would we have to go through procurement for if it's on our property, even if it's being paid for by someone else?
I don't know, that's a good question for Chris. We can have to.
I think the answer to that is no.
Right.
Yeah, I think I think it's only about the funding, I think, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't believe, no, we don't.
So it sounds like there's no objection from anybody here for you moving to the next step and doing the research. Main things are placement, who's paying for it, who's paying for the upkeep and the ongoing electricity, and if that's a school committee thing, that's a bigger conversation, because it's got to be part of the overall budget discussion for the whole district, and usually something has to go to make room for something else.
Right.
So, those things have to be ironed out, but certainly begin the conversations.
Okay.
And I do think the focus on the impact to the neighborhood is important.
Yeah.
I know for me, I'm kind of envisioning potentially having the proposal at some point in the future, should you get that far, and wanting to see notice to the neighbors, whether that's required or not, I don't know. But I'd want to see that and make sure that they had an opportunity to come in and express concerns, hear the kind of presentation that Paul's referring to, and feel confident that the change that we're potentially making to our property isn't going to have a hugely negative impact on the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I'd treat it, because as you probably know, it's been brought up about lights eventually at Mindess as well, right? And so think of this as you do this well, and you're going to then have the ability to go and say, we've done it here, that we've managed the impact properly, and I think that's definitely the way to go, because I can tell you that, and they're different neighbors for sure, but there's lots of concerns even about an electronic sign for Mindess. So people can be sensitive about it, and I think that's why I really recommend going the professional route, that you can have something that's just not trust us, but here's something that was professionally designed and will meet this specification, and I think that'll go a long way.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my main thing was to just ask guidance and thought, because again, even the fundraising side of once we find out what the price is, I don't know. But I wanted to make sure I let the families know, and had reached out to me over the fall.
Sure.
Hey,
Whether
told
it's
you
possible.
I would talk to the
Right.
committee, and we kind of at least have those conversations. So I know it's a longer process than the home run fence or the sign that we did, but I just wanted to start the process, so I appreciate.
No, we appreciate you coming. This is the
Thanks,
right
Sean.
first step. Sometimes things go really far down the road and we're like, what?
Well, we learned that with the sign. But I wasn't in the committee yet. I was an outsider. So.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for.
Good job.
you.
Thanks for
Coming in,
coming,
Sean.
Sean.
Okay.
Okay. School physician role, Dr. Chartor's retirement, recommended replacement, Dr. Michele Duke.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry. So, as you know, maybe you don't know, but we do have a school-assigned physician. It was Dr. Chartor. As he says, going back to 1976, we sign a $6,000 a year contract with Dr. Chartor's office to help with physicals for those students who can't get them. He'll come into the office. give free physicals, and offer other advice that we have throughout the year, immunizations, et cetera. He's retiring. He's recommending out of his office, Michele Duke is the next physician for the Ashland Public Schools. Christina Moulton, who is our lead nurse, said it'd be wonderful to have her on board. So really, the school committee's responsibility is to appoint the physician moving forward. So I'm just asking for approval to appoint Michele Duke, Dr. Michele Duke, as the school physician. And so Chris can enter into a contract with her. I will say, we are looking at the job description a little more deeply. Christina is, because the job description that Dr. Chartor had goes back to 1976. And really wasn't,
Job has changed.
the job's changed a little bit. So we're just working through some of that, those details. And once those are done, we can then enter into a contract. If
Is the expectation that contract essentially from monetary value will be, somewhere similar?
Exactly, yeah. I would say it's going to be close. I mean, I think what's happening is the duties have changed dramatically. So we'll want to get an idea what Dr. Chartor is actually looking at the job description and say, this is really what I do compared to what I used to do. And then we'll have to look at
What makes sense.
the denomination of
Right.
the contract.
Yeah,
But nominal for sure. Yeah.
Order of magnitude,
Correct.
it's similar to.
Correct, 100%.
Yeah.
What we're doing.
Yeah.
Motion?
I move to appoint or authorize Mr. Adams to negotiate a contract to appoint Michele Duke as the replacement for Dr. Chartor as the district physician.
Second.
All in favor, Paul?
Mark, you were.
Did I not say it right?
Yeah,
Yep.
well, so two things. One, I'm going to really abstain from the conversation because I think my firm may have a relationship with the place where the doctor is. So I'm just going to stay out of it. It just seemed like Aaron was the motion. I thought the question before the committee is, I think, the appointment.
Correct.
Right, and then functionally, the contract be done elsewhere. So I don't know if we had to vote to authorize that.
I will bring it back to you either way, I would.
Okay.
But I don't think we have in the past. We've said the same contract, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, however you want to do it.
So just
well,
move
I
to
mean, at the
appoint?
end of the day, if you're not entering into the contract and the contract has to come back to us anyway, then.
Right.
Right.
We can do that part
I
later.
would just
Then that
just
part's-
appoint
that's-
her.
That's
right.
part moot, that's part's moot, right?
Right.
Okay, so I move so strike the previous from the record. I move to appoint Dr. Michele Duke as the replacement school physician for Dr. Chartor.
Second.
All in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
And I'll abstain.
Aye. Okay, school choice funding allocation FY 2024.
So the numbers have not changed from previous years. Sorry, the backup, I was looking at it as well. The backup shows the amount we authorized back in 2019 and 20. It's the same amount, totaling $153,000. We've had good success with the amount of school choice funding. Again, how each building uses the school choice is that really they have their own autonomy to make a decision on what they're spending it on. I would say that as we move away from having more and more school choice students, as we've talked about last budget cycle, I'm cautiously looking at the amount of funds we are receiving in school choice. It's going to go down over the next few years just because of limited space. So keeping the amounts equivalent to what they have been over the past few years is at least fiscally conservative this year.
So to that point, Jim, can
And
you
we-
just
sorry.
tell us what the incoming school choice funds were ballpark? Are we spending all of it, I guess is the question, 153?
No.
Okay.
No. I don't have it off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look
We
at
have a
last
handle
year's.
balance in school choice
Okay.
from prior years.
Right.
And we're not, I guess the overarching question is, are we drawing that balance down with this allocation or holding it firm or allowing it to increase?
For this, no, we've included this allocation as part of our budget cycle from last year.
Okay.
So this is what's already in the budget from last
Correct. This is,
year.
we anticipated this amount of money, these amount of funds being used when
Okay.
we did our budget last year.
That's-
We just didn't appoint or, authorize
The spaces,
to each building.
right.
Yeah. So one question that I had, and, kind of looking at, obviously, each school, has a certain allocation of money and then different departments do. I'm wondering, and this is just a thought, this isn't necessarily something that I expect the conversation to move forward tonight, but I'm wondering if there's room to potentially allocate money to the arts as well. I know that there's a line item for athletics, particularly for our band, drama, music programs at the middle school, high school. Would there be space potentially to think about that? Just something to.
So, yes, there's always space to think about it. It's really determined by each building principal and the department. So art and music have an opportunity to utilize those funds if that's where the school, specific school determines that's where the need is. Athletics, for instance, is underfunded by about $250,000 a year for the most part.
But I think maybe the question is, why would athletics be itemized separately as for example,
because
a
it's
department?
outside of the.
Does it operate like within a school building, or does it operate across school buildings, I guess maybe is?
For athletics?
Yeah.
It would be operating across two buildings for sure, right?
So
Middle and high.
Okay. So I think the point's valid, right?
100%.
Supporting the arts.
I'm not discounting it, I'm just saying, yeah.
But the reason for $5,000 in athletics appears to be, like, it's not built into what we're allocating or expected to be built into the funding at a school level.
Yeah.
Then the question would be, like, well, should we put more
And
money?
I
in
was
the
just
whole
gonna
thing?
say, and that would be my thought in terms of, is there space to have a conversation about, because there are, yes, like music, band, drama, those things are part of our curriculum as well too, right? They're offered mainly as, not extracurriculars, what's the word I'm looking for? Electives, right? That particularly at the high school, that students take, and the middle school.
But the band and the extra
Right,
stuff,
but is there room, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to grow the additional programs that, particularly at the high school, around looking at the extracurricular piece, kind of like athletics is. I mean, obviously athletics is a whole different animal. We have a whole athletics department with a director, it's different in terms of how we structure things here in Ashland, but, kind of looking at this as different buckets of money.
Sure.
Is there space as we move forward? Obviously, this is already essentially allocated, but as we think, are there ways that we could potentially use some of this to help grow some of
Do
those
we,
other
I mean,
programs?
I don't know offhand, Kelly, how you've allocated all of school choice, but do arts and music and band class get some of those funds?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say there's definitely certain things that are not in their budget that's for, their day-to-day operations that we use school choice funds. The piano tuner was here yesterday, and that comes out of there rather than out of the music budget. So things like that.
And as, when I look at this, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, these line items correlate to an administrative position as well, right? So to your point, that we have an athletic director, so it's allocating it to a line item that is controlled. We do not have a similar director of, of the performing arts, and so it would fall to the building. And so it's, it sounds like it's already built in that they're getting that, but here it's listed as athletics because we can give Kevin, hey, here's something for you to spread throughout, and we have I think it's also positional. Positional is the reason why it's listed there
The
separately.
line item thing makes sense too.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly that could be folded into Kelly's budget and then given to Kevin indirectly, but I think it's because it's a director level position, just like SPED is. And
I mean, I think in some ways, like this line item allocation is just splitting this money up within what we had already budgeted to take from school choice. So the big picture question is, like, are we supporting our programs, including the arts,
100%.
at a level
Right.
that's appropriate, and we should always be talking about that kind of stuff.
And I would say, Tina, to that point, as we go through the budget process, if we're looking at the music and arts department budget itself, right? That's the opportunity to build it within the operating budget so it's sustainable long-term.
Sure.
Not just through, for me, I'm looking at the
Right,
school choice, those allocations, eventually that money's going to be depleted. But if it's not built within the
Yeah.
operating budget, how do we sustain even
Right.
giving, the music department $5,000 more? If it's not there in the future, I'd rather have it built. We have to go back to 2006, in 2007, before my time, that these funds this $150,000 was basically supply line items that were built into the operating budget that were removed from the operating budget. And never,
During the
ever,
recession.
it was never put back into the budget. So we've subsidized everything through school choice. And I've said for years, we'll never be able to sustain this unless we start building textbook line items, supply line items for each department back into the budget. Textbooks, hundreds, $200 a textbook now, if you want to replace a set of textbooks in a classroom. So
Yeah. Okay. No,
so
that
it's
makes sense.
it's a larger conversation for sure. And I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's a process question too, as far as like whether or not it should be the arts or building some other program or whatever it is. And I'm not saying, I don't think that we do this, because I know the budget process goes on for months before anything
Right,
even
right,
gets
right.
to
Yeah.
us. But I think the bigger point for me is to make sure that we're not just doing the same things that we always do just because we always do them. Like, we usually send this much to this school and this much to that school, and these are the programs that are covered. Like, maybe there's a different way to do it or a better way to do it. And I don't doubt that that's not considered when you're sitting down together. By time things get to us, I'm sure you've had those conversations, but it's helpful for us to understand.
Yeah.
So Jim, just maybe you said this, but what's the sort of the basis or calculation for the way that the proposed allocation has been done across our buildings? Like, I thought at one point we talked about.
We did have a bigger conversation about how
correlation
this
to
works.
student enrollment or something
Yeah.
like that.
It's a good question, right? I mean, I don't think we fully ever determined how we were going to.
Because I know we made adjustments
We
like
made some
4 or
adjustments.
5 years
Right.
ago.
Correct.
Because there have been like
So the high school,
concerns
again,
about it.
so the high school, for instance, right, is the school that has the most school choice students. And one would think, okay, they bring in the most revenue, therefore should the most of the allocation go towards the high school? Well, that's not the case. We're trying to equalize, if you look at percentage-wise, the high school's still getting a larger percentage of the pie, but
It doesn't line up exactly.
it used to be a
Yeah.
lot greater.
And they also have 4 grades of kids.
They have 4
so-
grades, right? But I think when looking at the budgets, quite often when Kelly's looking at the other principals and we're saying, okay, what are we not including within the operating budget? You know, who needs more textbooks? The high school. They offer many more classrooms. What is Mindess using it for? And how are they offsetting some of the costs that are not in the operating budget? But to your point, we don't have a strict formula, Paul, that we've decided on as a district. You know, again, one could argue that the school choice money should follow the building, if you want, the revenue, but that's not what it's designed for, right? It's designed to go across the entire district.
I'll move to approve the school choice allotments for FY '24 as presented.
Okay.
All in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Aye. High school improvement plan.
Oh, I gotta share it. Sorry, Kelly. I didn't do share. There you go.
All right.
And you should have a copy, a newer copy, I'm sorry, that Kelly added some stuff
Did
to
some
today.
updates and changes. Since we talked a little bit about this in July and since the school year started, we've had a chance to kind of start some of the work that we were talking about doing here. So I've made some adjustments to some of the things that we're doing. So obviously the first page looks at the district priorities. So I'm just going to maybe highlight a few of the things that are on here that are going to be our focus for the year and our work for the year. And really starting under maximizing academic growth down on the second one, and the goal of programming for students with alternative needs and paths to, and looking at different paths to a diploma. And we have started the work this year of being part of the DESE High School scheduling cohort. And I know I mentioned this in the summer, but we hadn't done any of the work yet. So we've, at this point, had the opportunity to come together 2 or 3 times with the cohort, which is nine communities, 9 diverse communities, to really talk about some of the things that we are all seeing with our students. And DESE has taken the last 5 years of our data around classes students are taking, teachers that are teaching certain courses, what our class sizes look like, et cetera. And we had the opportunity last week to meet with the representative from the agency and start looking at our dashboard with data around that. And kind of, we're looking at, were students on track to graduate? And, one of the most interesting numbers we saw was that their interpretation of our data is that 75% of our freshmen are on track to graduate at the end of freshman year, which was a number that kind of threw us. But it's giving us some information to really look at in terms of, all of our students don't take world language as freshmen, and so that impacts, were they really making sure that our students that are in maybe some of our separate classes were part of that in that information and that look at data. So we do not have the dashboard with us yet, but we're looking forward to really digging into all of the data and
So
looking
Kelly, did
at
you
it.
say that their data shows that only 75% of the freshman class is on track to, okay, but not at the end of their freshman year?
Based on the classes they're taking as
Okay.
freshman year. They're helping us really look at what are our graduation requirements, what do students at Ashland High School need to do every year
Gotcha.
to be at the place to get
So
a
their
diploma.
assessment is, as of right now, only 75% of them are on track to
Last year's
graduate.
freshman class.
Right. Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it was interesting to look at.
Right.
We're really looking forward to getting deeper
dig
into that
a
data
little bit. Yeah,
and
yeah.
think about how does our current schedule support what we're really looking to do with students.
Kelly, just can I ask a quick question on that? Is that based on our school committee policy with regard to graduation requirements?
Yes.
And/or the state requirement to
Ours.
apply to a state university or college?
We are looking at both of those
Okay.
things, but that particular number is based on our
Okay, thank you.
graduation
I think
requirements.
it's a distinct difference, making sure.
Yeah.
And, we're looking at other things as, in terms of how do we do our science curriculum and the 4 years of science? What do the students take in terms of to be considered to be on track for graduation? So some good conversations just starting just last week.
And Kelly, is a part of that discussion also like the math track?
Yes.
Which has caused some people some concern over the years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we will, sharing ideas and resources with other communities in terms of what they're doing. We had an interesting conversation with one of the schools that makes everybody take geometry as freshmen. So just starting to explore some of those different options and what it might mean for us. And then related to that underneath there, in terms of an action item, is really just evaluating some of those school to career options, alternative education, work study. So I think that's going to be a big bulk of the work we do this year is looking at what our current schedule does for students, how we're using our personnel is the other piece they're going to be helping us with. Are we using everybody to their full potential? Could we look at, rearranging how certain positions are currently being used. And then can we use personnel, or do we need to ask for new personnel in order to support some of the needs that we see out there? And I think I shared, our dropout rate, while it's not high, it did go up significantly in the past year. And I think, looking at our data, we know that a big part of it is students that leave school often for work. So we think it's important to look at options. Our current schedule, we don't feel allows for us to have students do a work study, have students do any kind of alternative options. in order to earn the diploma.
And what is the dropout rate for like last year's class?
I don't have the rate off the top of my head, I apologize. Our typical year, we would have 2 to 3 students leave school without a diploma, and last year we had 14.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big
Yeah.
deal for sure.
And we know that many of these students are students that are new to the community, new to the country, and that's part of what we're also looking at is as we expand services in that area. We hear from them that school is just too difficult to maintain, and so. Working with that, we've spent some time looking in other communities and what they're doing to meet the needs of those students, and so we've had some discussions about do we look at a half-day alternative program where half of their day is credits for work and half is school.
And those, I assume, are ones that we've confirmed are not enrolling to somewhere else or going to a different country to enroll, but they're not enrolling anywhere else and not
Yes.
completing any education.
Yeah, we follow up. I mean, we know the students who, the hard thing with students that withdraw from high school is there are some programs that they go to that it still is considered. So we do have a few. We really encourage students to use Job Corps or pursue their high set. We don't have high numbers for that, but we do have 1 or 2. So the other thing that we're going to be looking at this year around equity and some of these recommendations and action items came from both the equity audit last year, came from our JED audit that we'll talk about in a minute, but really wanted to make sure we're looking at our course levels. And we started the conversation last year with our site council about analyzing how we weight our courses. And our site council will be started the work this month of kind of reviewing other schools that have done the work already. They were all gracious enough to share their process. And we're going to take a look at that data and see what that means for Ashland High School and how we want to move forward with the discussion of whether or not we should unweight our different levels.
And I'll just say, I mean, being the sort of school committee representative of the site council, Kelly just shared this out last week.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody's interested in reading that material, I can certainly forward that along. But, actually, I'll do that now, and you can choose whether to look at it or not.
Yeah, I thought interesting point of data from one of those towns was they had surveyed the top 100 colleges that their students attend, and the vast majority completely unweight the GPA that the high school shares with them and just calculates on their own on a 4.0 scale. So we will have more on that, but that is one of the things that we're looking at from an equity standpoint, and those conversations really started around wanting to make sure we have students taking classes that are the right level for them, and not, the host of things, students don't take classes that are of interest to them, because it might be at a weight that they don't want to have part of their GPA. The whole conversation around student stress. They're taking 6 AP classes because they think they need to have a higher GPA, and the host of social emotional issues that leads to. So kind of a lot of facets to that conversation, but looking forward to having it. So those are kind of the highlights for this year around equity. In social emotional learning, I've talked a little bit here about our work we've been doing with JED High School. We spent 2 years with them looking at the things that we do, doing surveys, doing focus groups, etc. Our overall strategic plan is linked into this document if you do have it by Google Doc, but I gave you tonight a one-pager that they put together for us that are kind of going to be our priority areas for this year. And it really is just talking about, okay, what's our vision and mission around social emotional learning at the high school level. We had our first interdisciplinary team meeting, that was also last week. really looking at, okay, what are the things that we're going to focus on this year from the strategic plan? Really starting with vision and mission around social emotional learning. What do we want to do for mean safety? Really educating the community, whether it be within our own school. We had conversations with teachers that we don't always know what happens once we've made a referral for a student. And then continuing to work on, working with students so that they understand the protocols of what to do to seek support. And a lot of that work is also, we've had some conversations about crossover with some of the things that the safety committee is doing. Really looking to make sure that we have, these are our procedures for what we do when we have a concern X, Y, and Z about a student, and these are the steps we're going to take. So that committee, that group is starting with, they've taken many of the old procedures we've had for if there was a student incident on campus. Let's look at that, revise it as needed, and then we anticipate bringing a lot of that to the safety committee and then eventually to you for approval over the course of the year. And then again, the strategic plan, just making sure that we have that out to the community. We're going to talk at the beginning of the year about how we just present, these are our goals, these are our timelines for how we're going to do curriculum around social emotional learning, and then kind of a long-term focus that'll be after this year about making sure that faculty has some tools on how to embed it into day-to-day learning when appropriate, which also I know ties to some of the work the district is doing around making sure social emotional learning and the competencies are part of everything that we're all doing. Let's say that's it on that area. Resource management also ties into the safety piece, and we will continue this year to really focus on the training we're going to do around safety protocols. Again, in terms of the social emotional learning, I already referenced that we're going to be revising some of the practices that we have. We're going to continue to evaluate our classroom space as we've been growing. We have had to redesign how we use some of our spaces. And so I think, for the first time, we have teachers sharing classrooms. And we have, kind of moved where one of our life skills program is housed. We took kind of over a teacher's space and made that into the classroom, which has been wonderful for some of the activities that those students are working on. But we have not as much space as we've had in the past years in terms of to make sure that everyone has their own classroom space and that we have additional spaces to use. So that'll be something that will be ongoing this year as we look at the needs for next year, especially if we talk about any kind of additional programming being brought in based on what we do with the scheduling network and the social emotional work we're doing. And the other thing I highlighted in terms of around technology is we're having a lot of conversations at the high school, and I know every school is, around training and best practices with AI. We do have a group of teachers that is doing that as a goal area and it's across departments, and they've gone to some conferences. They're really looking at how do we get ahead, if it's possible to get ahead, of what the students are doing and how that we can be teaching them how to be thoughtful about using AI. And then hopefully they'll be sharing with their colleagues what they learned and how we can teach students to use the whole world of technology safely. So, that is resource management. And then finally with curriculum and programming, again, I already referenced the weighting system and looking at our course catalog to make sure that we have offerings. So that kind of also goes back to some of the alternative things that we were talking about offerings for students. In addition to talking about whether we look at internships, work study, et cetera, we've also have a small group working on looking at Bright programming, which we've looked at off and on over the years, which is programming that supports students coming back from long absences. And we're looking at whether or not we can maybe meld some programming that's Bright programming for supporting students that may be struggling with getting through the full school day, and students that might need more of that work study, and looking at how do we support the social emotional needs, the academic needs for those students that aren't finding success in the traditional classroom. So again, a lot of it is looking at how the flexibility and the things that we offer and how can we make adjustments to meet the needs of the students that are in front of us right now. And again, I think we are looking at a lot of the same things in a different way. So I would highlight on the last page is just really, again, the alternatives to a diploma, and how can we make sure we get a diploma in the hand of every student if possible. And then the final thing is then, again, just continuing to look at the community service opportunities and how we're going to make sure that is something that every student is exposed to over the course of the year. I thought we had a successful first experience at it. It was not what we had hoped it would be when we did the day back in October, but it was a good start, and we had a lot of kids out doing a lot of meaningful experiences around the community, and some outside of the community. So I think we'll continue to work with both the site council and our teachers throughout the year to see how can we do this in a meaningful way that everyone feels comfortable supporting the students. That'll be an ongoing discussion with our site council. Questions?
Questions, comments? Mark, you've been in it, so you probably have had your chance to.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, like the conversation about sort of the weighted grading system was something that just really started the dialogue at the end of last year, and hasn't yet really been the topic of conversation at Site Council this year, other than to tee it up, and the information I circulated to everybody tonight was in preparation for a meeting. Kelly, I think, wisely decided, you know what, it might be better to give people a little bit of time to digest the stuff before we start talking about it. But I'll be interested to see where the conversation goes. I mean, last year, there were sort of two immediate reactions. One is absolutely, and what are you, crazy? You know,
Yep,
and,
right.
and not much in
Feel
between.
very strongly about
Yeah.
it, one
And-
way or the other.
Yeah. And I think, look, I mean, it comes from the angst that the parents have, probably more than the kids, about what's the implication for college, right? And, you know, I certainly, going through that process, you're going through that process, you've been through that process 4 times. You know, it's, you start to learn as you go through it, and the comment you made, Kelly, along the way about how schools just, as soon as they get the GPA, they unweight it anyway. And that's certainly something I've heard, you know, out on the campaign trail, if you will. But I'll be interested to see where the dialogue goes too, and I do try to largely stay out of the substance of the conversations. I always feel like my role at the site council is to express sort of the point of view of the school committee. You know, what is it that we're focusing on, and how does it connect to our strategic goal, rather than participate as a member of the site council. So I tend to bite my tongue, you know, or at least, you know, keep my comments, you know, from a certain lens, and let the conversation go. Yes,
Yes.
I do, and it's, I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation, and I think you could easily go off on tangents all over the place about what the hell is the matter, what's grading all about to begin with, and what are we trying to do with this, and
Right.
and I have every confidence that Kelly will lead that discussion, you know, wherever it needs to go. But
Yeah, and it's part of our bigger conversation too, about wanting to like have these individual student plans, like what really is right for each individual student. It's not, you know, some thing that you're grasping at out there.
yeah,
Right.
It's more of a, what's right for you and you
Right.
and you, and it's different.
A lot of schools are, you know, doing career pathways and those programs that are, you know, through DESE, and we will have those conversations we have looked at it as an admin team, and we've had those conversations with the high school scheduling network as well. And so, kind of looking at some of those things that are out there that are far more individualized for students is, it's helping them get to where we want them to be.
Do they still do those tests that are trying to determine like what career that you'd be well suited for? You
Yes.
still have that?
Yep, they do
you guys
that as
remember that?
sophomores.
I remember doing it in 6th grade. Did not say I was going to be a lawyer. I think I was going to be a bus driver, but,
Well, I was joking about it this past weekend because mine said that I was like, my destiny was to be a member of the clergy, like a rabbi or a priest or
I
something.
thought you were going to say
That
school
makes sense.
committee.
No. And so, of course, like when you're a kid and you get that news, it's kind of weird. But I just married 2 of my kids, like I was the chaplain. So that was like the story that I told, like after 50 years, I'm living my destiny, finally. Any other questions, comments? We don't vote on this, by the way. You guys probably remember that. It's just an opportunity to give, if there are major concerns or some feedback. But it's the site council that has control over voting on the final.
Yeah. No, it's evident you guys
Proposal.
have put a ton of work into it, and thank you for putting it all in the format to align with the forthcoming strategic plan.
Yeah.
I mean, I should say that there are some people who've been on this site council for a long time. There are a couple, I won't name names, but a couple who are like, I think they were talking about who was going to take the minutes, and the 2 of them are bouncing back and forth for probably a decade, as they've had multiple children
Yeah,
going
I
through
think
the
I know
high
who you're
school.
talking about.
And,
Yeah.
I was like listening to that and like,
Yeah, she's done
it's, their commitment is really
They're
impressive.
invested, yeah.
Yeah.
And really impressive and important. And, I think you also have a nice addition of some new voices in the room too.
Yeah, I'm looking
which
forward
is
to.
important.
Yeah, and the student voices too at the high school level are
Yeah.
fantastic also. So it's a great opportunity for discussion.
I had one question on the 4th, so under resource management, it's the one where resource management's on the middle of that page. The 4th one, the technology in the thoughtful manner that it complements instruction and provides access to all. Like, Kelly, are you looking at this at all with a lens of consistency of application across departments or across teachers, especially where, it's my first couple months of school, and I'm just noticing sort of a drastic difference that makes some of those executive function skills or the management hard, because, you got to look at Jamboard here, or you got to look at Google Classroom here, or there's a piece of paper here, and to try to help guide your student becomes like somewhat of a logistical nightmare for the parent as well. And I don't know if like you're wrapping that consistency in that goal at all.
We've had some conversations about looking at consistency within departments, as opposed to across the entire school. And we have lots of conversations around that and go back and forth of, are they at the high school level? Is this the time they are learning to have many different approaches and to deal with many different approaches, versus needing to provide that support? So we are having some conversations around within departments, how they can look at doing some things consistency. But I think we're at the point of deciding, that we do want each department to have some ability to decide some of the things that they're doing. And
Some autonomy.
It could be some,
Okay.
Yeah, because they each have such different needs as well.
Right.
I will say that, I know our English department, our history department is working closely around, the piece of how are we doing essays now? And, are they going to be all on demand in school, rather than, assigning them as an at-home assignment like we might have done 5 years ago?
Because
they
you
can just-
can't
right.
use it if you're writing.
And how they use Google Classroom to assign those assignments. They're having a lot of conversations around consistency there, so that everyone has certain expectations for students when they are doing a piece of writing.
Yep, interesting. Anybody else? Excellent.
All right.
Thanks, Kelly.
Have a good night.
Thanks,
You
Kelly.
too. Okay, Jim NESDEC.
Sure. So as you know, each year, twice a year, actually, we have the New England School Development Council looked at our projected enrollment numbers for future years. And as always, I want to qualify it by saying, you know, years 5 through 10 are really just guesses on NESDEC's part. Years 1 through 4 are the ones that typically are the ones we look at and say they are most accurate, if you will. Not always perfectly accurate. It certainly turnover within the housing market within Ashland is important. There are a lot of single-family homes now that are being sold, and students families are moving in with children, and you'll see an increase in enrollment because of that. We currently still have almost 200 units that are to be built in town that have been approved. And even though there was the moratorium put on, these were projects that were already in the pipeline over on Chestnut Street and Homer Ave that pick up 170 plus in Chestnut. I don't know, so we don't know exactly how many students will be coming out of those apartments when they're finalized, but we know we'll get some. And so it's hard to quantify that. I'll show you the spreadsheet that I track on a daily basis that shows where our students are coming from, because I like to look at the condos and the apartment housing complexes and see really how many are coming out of these you know, multiple unit structures. I think it's important to look at. But I'm going to share this with you because I think when I first read it, I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And so Chris, myself, Mike, and actually Gretchen did sit with NESDEC maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago, Chris, and to ask a number of questions. But one, how did they determine, and I'll just jump right into it, how did they determine when they're looking at let's see here. Not this one.
Yeah, the straight line is concerning, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things that were concerning, but let me just see here. So go to enrollment, and then share this screen. View full screen. Okay. So the easiest thing to do is look at this projected enrollment, right? And if you look at, and I'm just going to highlight here with my mouse, if you look at the 2023-24 school year, the kindergarten students at 219, then it moves to 233 in grade 1, 242 in grade 2, 246, 251, 260, 269. That line was sort of concerning, right? It was like, oh my goodness, what's happening? And why are they anticipating the number of students who are going to be coming into the district? How is it working? So if you filter all the way through on page 12 in the packet you got, you'll notice they talk actually about the ratios that they use. And it's based on historical numbers, so the facts that existed previously. They're not saying this is perfect science, but if we look at, I'm going to go back to the historical enrollment, and if you look at, similarly, the line of from the 2013-14 school year, the kindergarten number is 196. Then it went to 206, so increased by 10 students in the first grade. Then it went to 219 in the second grade. So these are actual numbers. Then it dropped a little bit down, and then by the time they get to 5th and 6th grade, 218, 229, it starts to increase again. And so they looked at as a factor of increased year over year actual numbers. So that's what they're using for the projections. Does that sound right, Chris? How they described it? Mm-hmm. And they actually write that on, and I'll highlight it because I think it certainly was important, but it was just a confirmation of how they were doing it.
I'm seeing the reflection of Jim scrolling up there.
I'm sorry. So the projection methodology was here. If 100 students enrolled in grade 1 in 2023 increased to 104 students in grade 2, the percentage of survival would be 104%. I don't like the term survival,
I know,
but
that's a very odd way to
but that's
put
what they
it.
use.
We go completion.
Yeah, right.
So they use the ratio of 1.04. So ratios are calculated between each pair of grades or years in school over several recent years. So they're looking at the actual historical enrollment, and then trying to project future years with that. So it's, I found it interesting that's, Mark, you and I had this conversation, because I initially was like shocked and said, oh my God, we're going to be out of space soon.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, because you and I did have this communication when we first got this data, like, that didn't feel right, like what we've experienced, right? That we start with a kindergarten class of 200 and end up with a high school graduating class of 230 or whatever the number might be. It felt like, if anything, when we get to high school kids, some go off to private, some go to Keep Tech. And so I was very much looking forward to understanding it, because either my sense of things was just off, which is probably partially true, or this is a scare tactic. And
it's not.
It feels like, I mean, I obviously don't have, this isn't a scientific comment.
Right,
But
nor was mine.
But it feels more dynamic than it has been in the past.
So we see our largest increases, what they're saying is in that middle school timeframe, right? So that's where that high school number jumps up. Now, we lose about 19 kids, anywhere between 10 to 19 kids a year as they go into high school.
Right.
For a variety of reasons,
Right.
whether it's private school and or Keefe.
Yeah.
Right? Any of the vocational schools. But that percentage increase is what, we wanted confirmation as to why that number was going to go up. Now, there are some anomalies in here. I mean, I look at our kindergarten class, which is now a first grade class, right? And that first grade class is only 175. It only increased by 1 student last year. So we actually had them go back and say how many kids were, quote unquote, redshirting, if you will, and how many students who were in the current kindergarten class were at age appropriate, where they could have been in kindergarten last year and in first grade this year. It was 6 students, so not significant, which so we start digging more deeply into that type of data. Like, oh, wait a minute, maybe these families through COVID kept these kids another year or two, they didn't register them. Not really the case, it was 6 kids. So it's a weird, like
a reverse bubble.
Yeah, I just don't know where I've said this to staff and Warren staff, I don't know where the hell these first graders are. I don't know where they were as kindergarten. It was just a birth rate that was higher, but those kids they just moved somewhere.
They're offsetting our 9th grade class.
So from the NESDEC perspective, I feel comfortable looking at, again, we do this in the spring as well, partly because we have that transition of students who are moving, who move in. We still have, if you go around and look at the properties in Ashland, there's still a number of single families that are out there that are on the market, and we'll see what happens there. We have the fluctuation of students who move in and out, transient students. Families go back to Brazil, wherever it might be. So our numbers really do fluctuate. I'm not concerned. I think, when I started looking at this and I looked at Mindess, for instance, because I think about next door in Hopkinton, right? I mean, our population's at 669. It gets up to 684 by the 27-28 school year projection. Now, we have flexibility because of how the building was designed to handle this. So I'm comfortable with that. Now, that being said, if we got up to the 771 in 23-21 or 20-31-32, that might concern me a little bit. But I'll be retired, so somebody else can deal with it. But the greater point is, they're guessing beyond the first 4 years, like really significantly guessing. When I went back and looked at NESDEC projections, they're within a delta of 20 students per year over the course of the times we've done this. But that's partly because they take the data, the actual data, in the spring and readjust their projections. Like, they're taking October 1 numbers and then trying to develop something and then move it forward to, in the April, we do it again and say, okay, how many kids really actually are here?
So, I mean, if you look at this kind of data, it feels like it begs a million different questions. Like, where are we going to put them, right? I mean, if this comes to fruition,
Yep.
how are we going to educate them? Pardon my grammar, but in terms of a budget.
Yep.
And obviously, we get some amount of money from the state based on how many kids we have.
Yep.
But
In the profile of kids, remember, which I want to show you.
yeah, but this certainly says if we're looking long-term, this is within the range of possibilities, range of outcomes.
Yep.
And, you know, as I think about at least our space issues, I mean, we're talking about sort of at this maximum projection, having in 5 years, right? So the 2028 birth, I'm sorry, it's 2028 birth year.
Yep.
We'd have 3,226 kids, I think, if I'm reading it right.
In 10 years.
In 10 years.
In 10, okay, in
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah, so
But
go
in 5 years,
just
it
go
would be a
5
few
years.
hundred.
Okay.
Yeah.
A few hundred more.
3,056 kids.
Right, and
About
we're at,
220 kids.
right, 220. So, I mean, it just, Kelly was already talking about sort of space challenges at the high school, you know, but it just
Which is,
strikes
to
me
me,
as a
an
real challenge.
interesting concept, because the high school is built for 1,050 students.
Right.
So
Excuse me.
we're at 900, we could be up at 900. So again, it's how are we visualizing, utilizing space?
Right.
And I think that goes along with what Kelly's talking about, with even looking at the schedule, right? How is the schedule designed? The schedule designed at the middle school, we've had this conversation for ever. The schedule was designed when it was a smaller concept for the teaming, right? That's how it was designed. Now, when we have more students and you're adding half teams, it makes it a really difficult schedule to monitor and to utilize. You know, the middle school stays relatively flat, meaning that half team could and should be in existence if they continue with that schedule moving forward. It's not like we can just get rid of that half team. Otherwise, now the class sizes are up in the mid-30s again. So it does, I mean, it helps us as we're projecting budgetary stuff. I'm not really concerned over the next 3 to 5 years. But I think beyond that, we have to monitor it for sure. So I want to share.
So Jim, just before.
Yeah,
and-
sure.
And we can take this offline so I can better understand it, but I'm looking at like the historical enrollment
Yep.
chart. How are we supposed to read this? There's a birth year. there's
So don't worry
births,
about the birth year.
Then there's a school year.
Yeah.
So like if I'm trying to
Yeah,
track
yeah.
my,
So,
one
right,
of
so
my
if
kids.
you look at your
Diagonal.
kid, so let's assume Caden was born in 2008. He wasn't. I don't know.
2010.
Right, okay. But let's start with 2008, because I think that's the 10-year
That's
window that
safe.
we have to look at, right? So, because the 2018 students are the ones who are are in pre-K now. So if you look at the 2008 student, and I'm gonna start with really the K, and the K would really be 2007 kids. Does that make sense? It's the year before.
And that's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah,
was
so
like-
it goes
it's
in
like-
diagonal. So the pre-K, I'll stick with the pre-K. The pre-K's, it's a challenge because we're not required to have pre-K kids, right?
Right.
So I always start with K. I mean, I just lop it off and I start with K. So it would be in the 2013-14 school year, there were 196 K students, okay? Then in 2014-15, that same cohort of kids moved to first grade. There were 206 of them. So increased by 10 students. That's factual. We know that. Then in second grade, that first grade class increased to 219 students. So we added another 13 students. So over a course of kindergarten to second grade, we had 29 student increase for that birth year of 2008. If you look at the birth year of 2009, it went from 193 to 212 to 219. So another 26 students were added K through 2. And then it just cascades all the way down. So that's how that chart works. So those are the that's what they're using as their ratio. Saying, okay, well, wait a minute, you had 10 kids this year, 10 kids next year, 10 kids. we know that there's going to be at least additional 10 students.
So the thing that drives this, that it sounds like you've looked at, but they may not, is development in town of the types of housing that brings.
They do
more
look
kids.
at that.
Do they?
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's part of this.
But do they look at, so they look at both the future and historical to, so you're using a ratio.
That's right.
That if
That
you-
may
Yeah,
not
so
be.
that's a good question.
If there's a causation for that ratio,
Yeah.
they might be using an inflated ratio.
It's inflated, right? Probably, potentially.
But I know they're doing it for current projects and future forecasts, but if they didn't go back and say, hey,
So they don't know specifically, right? So they're just taking the raw number. They don't know specifically about, so if we look at the permits issued, and they go and they pull permits and birth certificates in town, right? To those families so not the families who moved into town and had babies, just the babies that were reported as being from Ashland. So similarly with building permits, so they look at the multi-units in single-family homes. So you can see there was a decrease from 2019 to 2023 in number of permits pulled for single-family homes. So there were 30 in 2019. There was 1 to date in 2023 for a single-family home. But multiple units, there was 64 in 2019, and then 174 for 2023. And they don't know specifically if it's a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and how many are going to be students potentially could live in those apartment complexes or condos. So like the American Boulevards is now in their final stage, right? They don't go in and look at how many kids are from those units. So it's hard for them. So they're just looking at that raw number of, okay, it increased 10 kids. They don't know where those kids came from. They don't know if it was single-family homes. They don't know if it was the apartment buildings that were permitted and are now, filling
yeah,
up.
no, it's
Yeah.
more if they're applying it on their forecasting, logically you should go back and apply the same to your ratios to better understand what you expect,
Right.
what your logic, if you're applying it in the future, go back to the past, adjust your ratios with the same logic, so you're not, because if they think it's valid enough for forecasting, that means it's valid enough to also use for your ratios, so you're not, because when you're using it for a ratio, it's a projection, but you can't project things based on what's already happened, and you got a bump.
Right.
So you can't predict another bump. So if there's a bump and you use
Right.
the logic here to
Yeah.
predict it, you should go back and adjust
Yeah.
your ratios.
I see what you're saying.
So
And-
you're not, say, hey, there's a bump. Well,
Right.
that means I'm going to forecast a bump in 3 years.
So, right, so they're looking at, right, they're not doing bumps, they're looking at a 10-year window, saying over 10 years, this is what happened in each of these grade levels.
Right.
And then they're applying that ratio to that grade level.
But I would say that at least for just having a sense of where the community is now compared to where it was 10 years ago.
Right.
The capacity for additional building is shrinking.
Sure.
Right? And so I don't know what the future is going to hold in that, but it would certainly suggest that at some point in time, about the years we're talking about, that huge sort of expansion off my neighborhood, which is like Ridgewood and Summit Ave or Summit Road, where there are tons and tons of kids. Like I don't know there's any space left in town for another development that size. That's going to generate, probably on average 2 kids per house. And I'm not saying that's fault for them. I'm just saying it's kind of like there's a lot of possibility that the sort of most aggressive growth projections may not come to be, because
Right.
I think we're running out of space in this town.
Well, it was interesting too to look at from the historical numbers over the past 10 years. There's been about a 15% increase, and then the projection is over the next 10 years there'll be another 13%.
Right.
So it's kind of like a similar. I mean, it's a little lower, but
Yeah.
roughly. And who knows if it'll come to pass? But
We'll keep this and check on them in 10 years.
right, exactly.
no, I mean,
yeah.
it's-
But thinking through, I mean, like. The demographics of the district have changed a lot, obviously the size and the number of students and housing them and class sizes and all that kind of stuff, and so,
We have more families that have, say, a 2-bedroom condo that might have 2 or 3 kids within those condos
right.
than we ever had before.
Yeah.
And are we seeing more, I hear more stories and know of people who are housing nieces and nephews, or they're, you know, families are, you know.
It's a,
Maximizing, yeah.
You know.
it's a grind, to say the least, to
That
determine if people
that
are
we're
actually
servicing
belong in
extended
Ashland.
families, more so than we used to.
We could have 2 full-time employees just determining whether or not folks actually are residents of Ashland. Like, it, literally, we could have that. Even when folks come to register, and we're looking for certain data to register them, it's like pulling teeth, trying to get actual information before we can let students in the building. But I think, again, it's interesting stuff, and to me, this is what I track.
We have this chart in here too, Jim, in our packet? No?
I don't know if I gave, no,
I don't think.
think
I don't
so.
think so, because I just finished it today.
Okay.
Because I literally do this daily. Because I think it's, and I wait until everything's updated. What you'll see here is just, and I'll share this and make sure it's in part of the packet, but you'll notice, let's get a little bit bigger here. It is, at the end of the school year, so our data that we reported to the state is the 6/20/30/23 number. Homeschool, I don't, you know, it's not part of this projection that I do daily. And then as of today, we've got 2,841 students in the district. When NESDEC did this, there was 2,835 students. So it's increased 6 students since October 26th, if you will.
So what was the number at the beginning of the year?
2798 is what we ended last year.
Ended last year, okay,
Right.
so we're plus 43.
3.
Okay.
Right. So,
Give me
and what you'll notice is the major difference is we graduated a class of 178, right? And that kindergarten class is at 220. That's 46 student difference. That's really the, so the projections, it's interesting, you know, how the numbers are panning out. And it's, don't look at the delta. It's delta by grade level, but it's not delta by cohort. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not cascading like NESDEC does. So, because 46 students is difference between last year's K and this year's K. So, it's not 174 to 174, it's actually 0. They have the same amount of students they had at the end of last year as they do currently today in that first grade, who were kindergartens the year before. I color coded it. I didn't. If that makes sense. I can track it by color. Except 208 is messed up. I just
Well, it is
noticed my gray is
interesting, 'cause
wrong.
like in Mindess, the classes all jumped up a chunk in Mindess, like that's where a lot of kids came in, huh? 3rd and 4th grade, am I reading that correctly?
So 3rd grade went from 199 to 194.
Okay, never mind, I'm looking at the next one, 4th grade.
222, correct. That
Yeah.
one went up 12 kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then the 5th, no, 6th grade class. that
Yeah, and the
one's
5th to
only
6th,
4,
right.
but
So you'll
yeah.
notice 5th to 6th, 6th to 7th,
Yeah,
and 7th to 8th. Like I said, that's the largest group, right?
Right, yeah.
That's where we're seeing our greatest increase every year. It's 12, 16, 21 extra kids.
right,
It's a full class, but at least it's spread out.
yeah, right.
I just remember we had that year, I don't know, what it was 7, 8 years ago already, where we had a ton of kids come in and a whole group in 5th grade.
Yep.
Like just randomly, we had to add another
Random
5th
bubble,
grade
yeah.
class. But it wasn't like a bubble of births,
Right.
it was a bubble of move-ins.
Move-ins, right.
So this is where NESDEC thinks their numbers are so accurate. It's because they're taking our data from October and then applying it to their current projection. So as I said, they're off 6 students from what they projected. It's because we gave them the actual numbers on October 1st. What I find interesting is this other data that we're tracking, that I track, our L students and our students on IEPs. So we have 211 students currently. It's really 229. Again, the pre-K is not included in the 211. Students who are English language learners currently. We have 575 students on IEPs, which is actually a decrease from 531. I take that back. It's actually the 42 should be. I have to go back and look at that. I don't know why we have a slight decrease I know that. And then in the yellow, the gold, and the other colors are the number of students in each building, so 70 L students. So
The percentages there aren't deltas, they're of student population, right?
correct. Well, of the number of L students, so 70 of 211, right? So 33%.
You lost me.
Yeah, you lost me. So the 7.43% and the 20.24%.
Oh, that's
is
of
what?
total population, Paul, right? I was
Right,
down here. I'm
yeah.
sorry, I was looking down below.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you talk about that color-coded part?
Yeah,
that
so
you
this
have
is the
listed?
number of students in Warren,
Okay.
specifically, of this total here.
Okay, so there's 70, oh, so that's a carry
So it's
down.
25, 23, and 22 is 70.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the L students, then the
Right.
IEPs,
Right.
IEP
And-
students.
And that's a percentage of the
And
total
that
of
percentage
those.
is of that total number of that
Correct.
demographic. above.
That's right, of that demographic, right, not of the whole population. Yeah. So 7.43% is the total number of students who are L students across the district.
And that is
And 20%.
active?
That's
or-
active as of today.
Or tracked? 'Cause-
Active,
because I
active,
remember that
not correct, that's active who are receiving services
today.
today.
Okay.
That's as of today. I know that for a fact.
Okay, and so the number of students on IEPs is about 20? Is that-
20.2%.
Okay.
It's 575 students as of today. If Ms. Brewer updated it correctly, which I'm 100% sure she did.
She's on the ball.
She is always on the ball.
What's the next column? 531.
Where am I? Oh, yeah, that's just comparables from the previous year, Paul. 531 students were on IEPs.
Okay.
Yeah,
Last year.
last year.
So that's.
So if, yeah, so this 28 represents, there were 30 students last year in the kindergarten level. There are 28 now in the first grade level. So we reduced, there were 2 students less on IEPs.
Okay.
So that's how it was working. So these are the languages, obviously. Portuguese, 75% of our students who are L students are Portuguese-speaking students, 158 of them. And then 24 Spanish-speaking. More interesting data to me is this, when we talk about more building projects. So we break out the number of students in condos and apartment complexes. So we just run a report and I pull it in and look at certain data that exists, whether they're free and reduced students, English language learner students, or students on IEPs. Like what percentage of those students coming from these housing complexes do we have? Because there was always this, as far back as I can remember, people were like, well, they move into these condos and they have all these kids and they're all on IEPs. Well, it's not true. It's like, it's sort of like, okay, let's look at the data and see really what it represents. It's a high number, for sure, but we have 713 students currently living in those 10 to 12, and again, it includes a couple different things. America Boulevard, Queen Isabella, John Hancock, all kinds.
That whole neighborhood.
That whole
Yeah,
neighborhood,
yeah.
right? So there's 161 students in there that currently reside in the Ashland Public Schools. So 713 of the 2,841 kids.
Jim, just the free and reduced.
Yeah.
Is that now free lunch, free meals for everybody, don't we?
They get meals, but we still have to classify them because that impacts Chapter 70.
Okay.
So when we're looking at, we still encourage folks to apply, and it also impacts busing or transportation, athletics, any other thing that we have for user fees. We want everyone to
Who qualifies? to-
qualify,
Yeah.
because it also, if you remember the incremental in the Chapter 70, that's how we're able to get pick up
And now it's
additional
based on,
Chapter 70
now it's
dollars.
based on the state programs. So
Correct.
they're going to be a part of that, not just for the services they get from
That's right.
from us.
Right.
Yeah, I will say that, I think it's helpful to have this data to think about projections.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly wouldn't want anybody looking at this stuff to sort of come away with the statements like you were illustrating before. like, that's where they come from, because I think there are a lot of reasons why
That's right.
families who have L students or students IEPs might be choosing.
I understand, right? I mean,
It's a result, not a cause.
Correct,
Right.
right, the causation isn't because, it's just really, I think, that's always the double-edged sword when you're looking at data. Is
Right.
people are gonna ask, okay, and they make these unfounded statements,
Right.
like, everyone's coming from here. Well, actually, guess what?
Right,
Yeah.
They're
numbers
not.
don't lie.
Right? But I do think it's important because at one time when we were looking at an override, we talked about Ashland being, probably I think at that time was the second largest condo apartment complex in the Commonwealth in terms of, I think Acton was number one.
Foxborough.
At Foxborough, right? In terms of the number of students impacting the school districts, right? I mean, again, we've got 25% of our students are coming out of a very small populated,
Right.
high-density set of residences, right? With 200 more to go, with 200 more apartments to go.
Units, right.
So,
And the state pushing for
More apartments.
more apartments along, over where the MBTA station is.
right, exactly, right.
Right.
So how does that impact us, right? So it's just, I think it's just,
It does, is kind of probably beyond the scope of what we can do to some degree, but, I know that when Hopkinton approved the Legacy Farms development, they also had triggers, in there in terms of what the developer, I think, had to pay to the town in the event of a certain spike in enrollment. I think it was to the tune of $1 million, if I remember right. And, I think Ashland kind of, after Cirrus, kind of like, oh, we should have thought of that
Right.
too, kind of thing. A little too late, but as we look at these types of developments, it's certainly something I think we as a school committee and school district need to advocate with the other town boards to be looking at those types of
right.
linkage fees or contingencies or what have you, to support the growth.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Cirrus has given us 55 kids.
Right. But like the first year or two that was there was like 6.
Right.
Right?
So
Well,
I think the initial, I think it was
well,
74, 78
What we-
originally.
Yeah,
It
was never as
it's
many
still
as
well
we
below
thought.
what the
Well below
forecast.
what
Right.
they
Forecast was
projected.
like 75 or 80
Yeah, it
or
was-
something.
yeah,
Something like
74
that.
was the number that popped in my head.
Yeah.
But again, there's no, there's no science behind exactly how they're determining it. Like, they say, well, if it's a 1-bedroom, you might get a 0.2 of a kid. Well, I don't, really?
Yeah.
5 bedrooms, you get a whole kid.
Yeah, right? 5 bedrooms, you might get 3. Who knows, right? It's like, so again, we have this conversation. We're still a growing population. We will continue to be growing over the next
Right.
3 to 5 years. That's really the story. What it looks like, I'm not sure. I don't think anyone can definitively say we're going to get 30 more kids. But I think we have to, as we continue to build our budget and project for the future,
Right.
and looking at our staffing, that's important. So when, and again, it's probably out of the scope of this conversation, with the exception of when we're looking at our ESSER funding, that's going to be utilized, finished up this year, with those half teams at the middle school. The bottom line is, we have to absorb those teachers into our operating budget
Right.
next year.
Right.
And that's what we've been planning for.
Right.
Be clear, we've
Right.
had
You
the
knew that
foresight
would happen, yeah.
to look at, many districts did not use ESSER funding for staffing because they were afraid it would go away and they would never have it again. The way Chris and I and Mike looked at it was, well, we also know we're going to have anywhere between 8 and 15 retirements over the next 3 years. And so we have to hire more strategically and utilize those funds to offset the money that we're not getting through the grant funding or the ESSER funding. So it'll be an interesting exercise when we start asking for staff in our budgeting process. I talked to Pete today at Warren and, determining, what his numbers are going to look like. He's still got 1 more year of that small class, right? And we'll go to 2nd grade. So we'll see what kindergarten looks like in the spring. So, those are the projections.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add to a
I
superintendent's
don't.
update?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Thanksgiving break starts tomorrow.
Woohoo! Paul, do you have warrant approval?
I do. Between October 26, 2023 and November 21st, 2023, I, Paul Kendall, authorized by my signatures payables in the amount of $1,038,247.90. This includes general fund expenses of $312,745.48, revolving expenses of $716,251.11, grant expenses of $9,222.60, and meal tax expenses of $28.71.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything on the minutes from October 25? I think that was the meeting that you missed, Tina.
yeah.
Anybody else have anything? Motion?
Move to approve the minutes of, from October 25, 2023 as presented.
Second.
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Aye, even though I wasn't there. I don't know if I get to vote on this one, but.
Aye.
Aye. Gifts and donations?
Sure. Paula Pepper, $50 to the Helping Our Own Fund. Deb Pelletier, $50 Helping Our Own Fund. Jill Burns, $300 Helping Our Own Fund. Kim Robinson, $25 Helping Our Own Fund. Ohio Pile, $82.76 miscellaneous gifts and donations. Families Friends of David Mindess Library, $9,332.71 for the book fair. Elisa and Ben Daigle, $25 for Helping Our Own Fund, and Greg Regan, $30 Helping Our Own Fund, for a total of $9,895.47.
Thank you. Motion to approve?
Motion to approve the gifts and donations as presented?
Second.
All in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Aye.
Mark? Aye. Committee member updates.
Paul?
Let's see. So I've met for a while. Trying to look through. I know there's been several different things. When was our last meeting? There we go. So I did, they had the Halloween parade this year. First time going to the new school, so I did pop over for that. That was pretty cool. Let's see, I know there's a couple other things. We had a safety committee meeting, and I've attended the concert, and sorry, I should have been more prepared here. Went to the EL night that they had at the Mindess, which was again a success, and thanks Christy and everyone for, I know we've been talking about how we engage our EL population families, and we haven't had much success, but since Christy's started that, it's been very successful. We had I don't know what the numbers are, but we had
Ended up being over 100 folks with
Wow, that's
parents and
great.
kids.
Nice.
yeah.
That was a
So,
great group,
Wow.
yeah.
and I guess the big thing is I shared it with you. We did open the playground yesterday, yesterday to the school. So the bus loop and playground are now fully operational. They won't use the bus loop until I think after break, but there's been kids out on the playground, and everybody's really excited to have a legitimate playground to use, and as opposed to just running around in the dirt. And I'm assuming Mike and Randy and everyone, all the custodians at Mindess are gonna like that as well, because
Say everybody
Not
does
as
laundry
much.
at home,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
well, if you walk the hallways over at that end of the building where they come in from current recess, it's a disaster. So they had the work cut out for them, so I'm sure they're going to appreciate the not having to sweep up all that stuff all the time. So
They're just waiting for the pavement to sort of harden before they drive on it?
no, just planning and when you make changes for the bus drivers
Yeah,
and
gotcha.
and for the parents and stuff like that. Yeah, so, and they didn't, we've been really pushing to get that turned over, so it wasn't until I'm trying to remember when I told Jenna, gave her the news, I think it was think it was Thursday, Thursday evening, last Thursday evening, I gave her the news that we'd give it to her on Monday, so she didn't have a lot of, I told her we were pushing for that, but until we had all our ducks in a row and all sign-offs, so couldn't give it to her, so, and scheduling the fence to get taken down and all that stuff, so it's just be prudent. They haven't had a full recess out there yet. They've been bringing each of the classes out there, going over the rules and having them have some lower key experiences on it, and before they unleash the masses on it. So,
You pleased with how it turned out?
yeah, it's if you haven't been over there, it's
not
beautiful.
recently.
It's you know, we designed it on paper and we rendered it, and I think it actually exceeds that. So it's pretty cool to see.
That's awesome. Yep. I have a fifth grader that's been getting his instructions, like small groups going out and getting what are the new rules, how do you play on certain pieces of equipment and that sort of stuff. So I believe they might be, as a special for the half day tomorrow, I think they might be doing a full recess.
Except the weather.
I was gonna say,
That's why they did it the last 2 days. They pushed it up yesterday.
yeah, and they shifted
We're
the
getting
turkey
historic.
trot until
Yeah.
today
Unfortunately.
because of the weather.
Well, it'd be nice to come back from
Yeah,
vacation. Yes, so the safety committee met, and so the cadence on that will be monthly, the first Thursday, right? The first Thursday of every month.
Yeah, whatever that one was.
And so that'll be the
Yes.
cadence going forward. There's more discussions about Alice certifications and this trickle-down methodology of essentially teach the teacher, and then having admins being our in-house staff for that, and then having that trickle down and through PD in the building. But potentially, I know you were researching bringing somebody in as well. So we'll probably after the December meeting have an update to share on that. And first kids night out in the actual building in Mindess was a success, and I think I was stuck in a corner doing face paint. It was wonderful. I love seeing all the kids, but you know, just seeing the kids so excited and like exploring their new space and having it clean and bright, it was just wonderful. So again, more kudos for you.
Yeah, I did stop over to that. I didn't put it on my calendar, so I forgot to mention it. But yeah, it was. It's the loudest I've ever heard that cafeteria, because they had the dance party going on in there. It was
fun.
It was really
Were you
loud.
up in the media room watching and just?
I did go up there and look, you know, and stuff like that. But they also, and thanks to Len for doing this. So I connected Jenna with Len, and he had hooked up his telescope up on so that she was taking small groups of students up on the roof, the outdoor space on the roof, and looking at the moon and having conversations. So she was really excited about that, and so thanks, Len, for doing that. So I probably should have, you know, thanks for reminding me about Kano. I wanted to mention that as well.
So let's see, lots of things going on this month. So I was able to also attend the EL night last week. It was great. It was really nice to see all the families there and engaging with one another, with the faculty and the administration, and to see all the kids too. Like they were having fun, which was nice. So it was nice to see them all in the building. I also attended the AshPAC meeting this past month with, you know, there was a robust discussion about a number of different things. Brittany is the one who tends to answer most of their questions and share a lot of information with them. There was a lot of discussion about the 18 to 22 program that Brittany is working on. So she was sharing, you know, kind of some of her thoughts about that. It's still in the planning phases. But, you know, parents had a lot of questions in terms of what that was going to look like. You know, we also discussed, you know, different survey results and whatnot, things that AshPAC had been doing. And one of the questions they had for me is in terms of some clarification on Jim's goal. They know they had listened to the meeting and had some questions about the goal around attendance and looking at absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism. So we discussed kind of what that goal meant and how it came out of a state directive and what that means. And so I think, you know, between Brittany and I think we were able to answer any questions you know, that they had. And so it was good. It was a nice, robust meeting. I also had the opportunity, like Paul, to attend the high school band concert. It was actually high school and middle school, so they had the 7th, 8th, and high school bands play, which was nice. The 8th graders get the opportunity to play with the high school kids at the fall concert, so they enjoyed that. The AHS Drama Club also had a performance this past week, and it was a very, very unique play. And I'm going to say the name wrong. It was either She Kills Monsters or She something with. I apologize that I don't have the correct name, but it was a really unique play, and it was very. They did a very good job on it. It touched on some sensitive topics and walked through a lot of different things, and they did a really good job of making it very entertaining and dealing with the issues that the story dealt with. There was also, we had a number of kids from the high school this past weekend audition for districts, for central districts, for both band and chorus. And there's a huge group of kids from Ashland who, and I apologize that I don't have the list here to read it, but who were selected to be part of either the band, the orchestra, or the chorus for central districts, and a number of them were also offered auditions for all states.
And does one of them live in your house?
One of them does live in my house, yes. So we're very proud
I
of
did
him.
see that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're allowed to brag here.
And, you know, and a couple of the students were actually, you know, they didn't just make the band or the orchestra, but they were placed as the principal instrument player in their instrument for all of Central District. So they had a great showing. Yeah, they had a really great showing at district auditions this weekend. So, you know, Mr. Mall and Miss Namath, is that right? Is that the right teacher? Thank you. You know, should be very proud. Their students had a great showing. So
Excellent. Congratulations.
yeah.
So I just had two things. One, the MASC conference did go on without all of you. So I was down at the conference from Wednesday through mid-afternoon Friday. A number of actually interesting speakers, a lot of content about DEI programming, some of which, quite frankly, seemed a little basic, but probably also appropriate for people who are like new to the school committees, et cetera. And also a very interesting speaker from MIT around AI and sort of the challenges where we are with what's the term, not iterative, generative AI, and sort of what it is, what it isn't, which maybe some of you already know, the challenges that face education with it. But interesting, very interesting speakers. So a couple of good ones. I wasn't able to go to a lot of it because I kind of had my work a hat on for 75% of the conference, but good programs, and I did spend some time with the folks from Grafton as usual. So,
Awesome.
And then the other thing I'll just share by way of update for Paul, Aaron, and you, Lori, is we do have dates to start collective bargaining negotiations in early January, and Jim, Tina, and I need to schedule a time to get in a room and talk through that a little bit. But that is forthcoming, and then once we've met with them and have an understanding of what they're looking for, we'll have an executive session to talk about how to respond. That's what I've got.
Excellent. I also attended the EL dinner the other night. Kudos to Christy and her team. They did an excellent job. It was nice seeing so many people out and enjoying that beautiful building. I attended the Warren Site Council. We also had some good communications about how to, welcome people into that building, and what's the best way to do that. Is it through, a food night or a dance night, and parents had some really good feedback about communication, and I shared that it's something that we've been working on, forever, really, truly, a parent shared, and it's something that we've talked about here before, but especially as our community becomes more diverse, people coming from different places, that there aren't the same expectations in some places about the involvement in school, at in your kids' school education, whatever. So there are, I think there's some folks that aren't really sure what's appropriate. And so it's just helping us understand. I think we need to have some cultural training or sensitivity about that, so that we can best reach out. And then we need to continue to find ways to
And
invite people in.
I'm
You
just
gotta
going to
go.
excuse myself, my airplane that I have to meet is coming in earlier than expected.
Oh, gosh.
So,
Get on the road.
And that's all I have anyway, so, we,
I should have mentioned, just, like, I did attend Mindess Site Council. They also were talking about different ways to celebrate the diversity and the inclusion, and had some robust
Happy Thanksgiving,
conversations
happy Thanksgiving, thanks.
around some of that stuff, so just want to give them the nod that they're working on those things as well.
Yeah, it's nice to see those conversations happening at the building level.
It's like we need portrait of a guardian in addition to like the
Right.
ISFPs and the portrait of the graduate of like, hey, here's like normal behavior between like, you know, your child's teacher of like, hey, can we talk about this? Like maybe emailing them every day and badgering them is not the right way to go, you know, like certain kind of the social norms that, you know, I think some, especially coming from a different country, you may just be hesitant to begin with, right? And then I've always felt, and I've said this to you all privately, like as a school committee member, knowing what our teachers go through, I personally hold back. And if I had like a document that's like, here's what's normal and okay, like I maybe would have engaged more, you know?
I think that's really hard to figure out what's normal and okay for.
Right.
I think that gets into a really slippery slope.
Yeah. But I think part of, I guess, the work is, it's not just about the tools and how you reach out, it's about how it's being received and understanding who you're reaching out to and what their needs are. And it's not like one size fits all
Right.
in our community, which is a beautiful thing.
Right.
But it just
Right.
means that we have to put some effort into understanding.
And looking at what we can control and how we can contribute to that relationship. That's, yeah.
Exactly.
Like I like in Kelly's note, I don't know if it's in the daily announcements, but I think it's in her weekly thing. She talks about like, go here first, then here, then finally come to me if you have an issue. Like, I think that's really good guidance.
Yeah, sometimes it's nice to have a roadmap. So as far as action items, Jim, is it your plan to have like one or two each meeting
Yep.
for the improvement plan? So we started with the high school and we'll keep going
Kelly,
until,
I knew was the most prepared.
yeah, so,
Ready to roll with
great.
it.
Just to know what to anticipate going forward. So that's
Yeah.
all I know, that's,
Yep.
that we should add to action items, and other than the normal stuff that our next meeting's December 8th, I think?
That sounds right.
Town meeting is the 29th.
Town meeting is
November 29th, yes.
29th.
December 8th, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a Friday.
No,
Oh.
6th.
6th.
Sorry.
It's the second Wednesday.
So the second Wednesday is actually the 13th.
No, aren't we on
First and third?
first and third?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, we were second and fourth.
Okay, because I have the 13th and the
Yes,
27th on
second.
my
See what I have in
calendar.
my
It's the 13th, yeah.
Yeah,
The 13th
it's
is
the
our next
13th?
meeting?
yep,
That's what I have from Gretchen.
that's what I have as well.
13th and 27th
Okay.
is vacation week, though. We didn't-
Okay.
So we won't be
Right, we
meeting
do
on the
13th,
27th.
right.
So we'll just have one meeting in December, and it will be on the
And
13th.
town meeting's the 29th.
Right.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep. And,
And if we have any business that comes up in the next week, we could do something on the night beforehand.
Right, if
Yeah.
we need to.
right. And it sounds like so far into the future, but not really. So if we're not meeting till December 13th, then that would be the time to start talking about whether we're going to have a meeting in January, talking about the budget.
Right, right.
We're just in that process. We have a meeting next week.
Yeah.
With admin.
Okay. All right, I'll take
All right,
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
So Jim, do you want you and I to